today. We're going to do some quick introductions. This is the fundamental group. That's Bruce and Tom. The two of us have been doing this business for over 20 years. We've been working with companies like NetSuite, and this is a picture of them before they were even NetSuite, when their headquarters was next to a liquor store above a beauty salon. So we've been in the B2B SaaS space for a long time. These are just some of the other clients that we've worked with along the way. And our job is really, when we work with clients, to do two things: is help them discover their purpose, and then use that to drive revenue and employee engagement. Pretty straightforward. We're excited today to have a special guest joining us. One of the great clients we've had along the way during our journey is Grant Johnson. Grant is a 5-time CMO. He also is a growth advisor and executive coach. He runs a company called CMO Mentor, where he's mentored up 20 and up and coming CMOs. He's scaled startups to $1 billion in revenue, mostly like us in the B2B SaaS world. He's acquired 21 companies in that period of time and been in 7 companies that were acquired. And not only that, he's a 4-time USTA National Championship participant. So if there are any tennis players out there, give him a shout. And like we said, he happens to be one of our favorite clients as well. So today, there are really only 2 things that we're trying to achieve in our webinar today. And that is, number one, we want to talk about how you build a great brand. And number 2, we want to, with Grant's help, talk about how to measure its impact of having a great brand, and also the impact of all marketing. Grant's going to talk a lot about the marketing performance index that he's developed and how he's applied that to companies. And we're going to start by talking about a company called Emburse, where Grant was a client of ours for the first time. And Emburse is a company that is in the software space. It's a B2B SaaS company that provides technology that allows companies to manage their expenses. And when we say that, it's the world of expense reports. So it's automating expense reports, but also other accounts payable functions, invoicing and such. And so we've been working with Grant since, I guess, 2019. And this project was one that we did at that time. And so Grant had a real challenge on his hands. So first, there was the brand challenge of merging 7 separate brands and divisions into one company. There's 7 different companies in that space that they had to roll together and become sort of a category disruptor. They needed to make some change in a category that was a very crowded one. Second, it was there were marketing challenges. They had to merge these different marketing organizations into one unified global team. They had brand deliverables like brand creation. They had to create a new brand. They weren't named Emburse at the time, but that's another story. They had to come up with mission, vision, and values, and lots of marketing deliverables. They had to have a new organizational structure. They had to elevate demand and demand gen and their digital marketing, and raise the bar, all the way across, raise the bar all the way across the board. So this was no small feat that he was undertaking. Now I need to record because I had forgotten to record up to this point. So here we go.
Let's jump through. So now you have a little bit of background about this company. Remember, it's in the accounts payable, expense report, management space is what we're talking about. So, so this is where Bruce and I jumped in. And for us, it all starts with purpose.
So, this, as you can read, the purpose is the foundation for everything you do. But we're really not talking about making the world a better place purpose that we've heard so much about. We really are talking about making the world of your customer a better place, which is a big difference because we are looking to make you grow your business, and everything else is immaterial. When we deal with purpose, we try where it is a foundational practice. For example, for the marketing person, it will influence the website, outbound videos, inbound videos, any communications, social events. When you deal with the sales team, it'll affect the talk tracks and the sales decks. It'll also give them a better story down the line, a better story to pitch. CEO will deal with the leadership and the external relations, basically a underpinning for all press, et cetera, and also the way that they can talk back to the organization. And then for HR, where we found, which is very vital in our practice to bring the HR in, because what we wind up is something that can help them pitch the values retain employees, onboard new employees, increase productivity, and just making the organization feel more desirable.
So it's the centerpiece of everything that we do, and that's how we start, by building the purpose and then going from there.
In two short sentences, the purpose to us is basically the why you exist and why should anybody care. That's the two things that we do with On Purpose.
So when you're building that purpose, it takes a team. This is not something that can, come straight out of the marketing department and just get slapped on some t-shirts and passed around the organization. If its purpose is going to be meaningful, you're going to have to get a whole lot of people involved in the organization to create it. And that's what we did with when we worked with Emburse. So we had the executive leadership team participating in the process. We had every department represented: legal, finance, all people who are in IT. Everybody within the organization had to be a part of creating this, because when everybody has a part in creating it, they have a stake in making sure that it moves forward and it becomes something that's real and crystallizes. We tend to, when we pick the people that participate, we do tend to over-index on customer-facing roles. So people like sales and marketing, customer success, and product, people that have a lot of contact with customers, because your purpose has to, as Bruce said, have a lot to do with what your customers want. And so we do that. So in this process, we interviewed 30 people within the organization. And then down the line, we actually brought together two groups of 25 people, one in New York and one in LA, to do some exercises and sessions to help create and build the purpose. So it was a big, big effort across the organization.
And one of the reasons why, one of the things we look for here is to see what they feel are the strengths, attributes, problems, et cetera, of their product or service. Because what we want to do then is have that in mind, because we're going to talk to customers. And this is probably one of the most important aspects of our process in terms of building the brand and finding your purpose. We have to marry what you guys say inside a company to what your customers say outside a company. We have to make sure they match up. And if they don't, we have a bigger discussion. So when we do this, it's sort of a laddered sort of psychological profile. What's it like to be them? What are their challenges? What are their goals? What are their fears? What are their deep fears? How are they viewed within the organization? And how do you impact their world? Ultimately, what do you do that keeps them in their job? What do you do that makes their day easier? Again, what do you do to make their world a better place?
Yeah. This isn't something that you...
And by the way, what don't you do that you think you do? This is part of what we do. Is a checklist that we put together, and we look for things that match or don't match.
Yeah. And this is not something that you build off a little survey that you send out. Right. This is conversations with customers where you allow them to kind of talk freely about whatever they want to talk about, and you get an earful. Trust me.
And one of the things that happens during these conversations, because they're not short and they're not frivolous focus groups. They're essentially one-on-ones, and these people start to reveal secrets towards the process of the organization, and they're very vital.
So the last thing you need to do is understand the competition. This sounds kind of straightforward, so I won't belabor it, but through the lens of what you've learned about your customers, does their offering resonate, and does how they're communicating their offering resonate? Because ultimately you have to be different than your competition. If you say the same thing, you're not going to stand out, right? But at the same time, you have to be true to who you are as an organization and be aligned with what your customers are looking for. So again, we spent time reviewing competition with the organization. So what did we find out from those three things? Let's talk a little bit first about the customers. We had the team, as I said, in these sessions, 25 people in each city. We built a profile of who the customer was together. And we asked the team to create and find images that explained what their world was like. And this is one of the images that the team came back with. It was a person that couldn't cross the chasm. And their decision maker was a CFO. They're the ones that decide on the expense management and AP solutions that the company's going to use. And in the before world, it was somebody that just couldn't figure out what to do. CFOs were people that we discovered were the ones that had to make all the hard choices in their minds. They felt lonely and isolated being at the top because they were kind of the office of no. people would come to them with their initiatives and want, more budget, and the CFO would say no, or they'd want to stay an extra day in that city to visit their ailing mom, and the CFO would say no. That they weren't going to do that. Deep down inside, they really feared surprises. CFOs hate surprises. Anyone who's in the finance world knows that. And sometimes they just feel like they're the only adult in the room, that they are sort of trying to hold back the crazy spending that hedonists and the 1% of the crazy people who like to go and spend money on their business trips are going to do. So that's part of what the universe is like for them beforehand. That's the world that we developed as the profile for the customer before.
And then we got into the decision maker after we started analyzing this whole thing, what they would really love to be, what they were desiring to join, was to be part of the team, to be connected to them. They of course are going to make an impact, but they didn't want to babysit, and we needed to provide something that didn't have to babysit. But they also needed to gain the trust, respect, and empower the employee. So we needed something that did this. What Tom was talking about, the use of spending. We also had on the employee side the fact that they traveled all week. They spend all weekends doing this expense report. So there's the massive resentment that goes on during the horribleness of expense report management. Needed to be pulled away, needed to be stopped, because it came on the desk of the CFO and they were the enemy.
So Emburse's solution just allowed them to have a completely different mindset from that, like, this is impossible and I'm all alone, to I'm going to be part of the team and everybody's going to like me. That's essentially what the transition was that we were trying to help them make and as they communicated the brand.
One of the things that we do in our process is to take people through what we call the fundamental human values. And there's a long presentation about that we won't do here. And please email us about it if you want to know more. But there are 5 of them, and the one that resonated most with the Emburse group. And then this is done very democratically. Everybody votes on one of the 5, and they also put features down that they can really back that decision. All right. And the number 1 fundamental human value, not in level of importance, but just as a list, is happiness and contentment, i.e. happiness and contentment is like Disney and also insurance. Happiness and contentment is not frivolous. It's probably the best thing we can all be, is happy. What Emburse did was reduce friction. It started to convey trust, and it allowed respect to glow. Emburse indicated that you value their time. Okay, so when you give them Emburse, you value your employees' time. You remove the fear of late expense reports or bad expense reports or whatever. The fear of also not being able to pay your bills. So it reduced all that friction between the employee and the CFO, which created both happiness for the employee and happiness for the CFO. And it makes for a sense of like everything is okay. That was the number 1 fundamental human value we had for Emburse. And again, we'll go into the long description of fundamental in human values individually, but this is where we wound up with them.
So I want to address, we had a question from David about whether or not Concur would have come to similar conclusions about customers. And interestingly, I wanted to address that here. That was the issue, was that Concur had not done that. In fact, SAP Concur's positioning was all around controlling spend. It was actually feeding into the fears and the worries that CFOs had. It was sort of saying to them, we're going to help you control all of this. And actually, that was the completely wrong message. That's not what the CFOs ultimately wanted. Yeah, that was sort of table stakes for them. Yes, of course you want to control it, but you didn't want to have to control. You wanted to create an environment in which people were trusted and respected. And that was the issue. SAP from the interviews that we had with both customers and internally, what we'd heard was that SAP was all about selling and making transactions. They were not flexible. They were a completely rigid solution, very difficult to customize or make it work for how your organization did its work. They were also sort of like the Sunshine Friends. SAP liked to turn up about 2 months before your contract was about to renew, your subscription was about to renew, and say, "Hey, how are you? You guys must be great. How would you like to re-up?" And disappear for an entire year. They kind of had an arrogant side. And so
the other thing about this, it's important in terms of a marketplace reality, is that when a huge company buys a smaller company to fulfill a niche of what they needed to provide, you can be almost guaranteed that that little company that fills that niche will be generally ignored. It's good enough for now. Leave it alone. The hell with it. This is a great opportunity for a hungry younger company like an Emburse that's rolling up a whole bunch of very, very good expense management tools to compete. And yes,
yeah, and so
Thomas says right. Ultimately, you don't start off your strategy of your app by considering your own customer, your employee, as being potentially a villain.
And so this was the contrast that we were trying to create in who their brand was about. It's in every respect the opposite of the big guy in the category. They left a big opportunity and a big opening for Emburse to jump into.
So when we get all these items down, we get all these singular words that can be very, very unpacked. We aim everybody at creating a purpose statement, which is a very difficult process, but also one that's really great because it brings out the best in everybody. Everybody's deeply thinking about their business. It can't be long, 7 to 10 words. No products or categories are mentioned. This needs to be what I call scalable. All right. Since we're in tech, the purpose statement needs to be scalable to potentially everything you do, every feature you'll make. It does want to answer, why does your company exist? Why should customers care? Why should employees care? It's a very large statement and it's very simply done. The less words, the better, because the bigger it should be. When we get into using that purpose statement and expressing that purpose statement, things can get longer. But again, the purpose statement is a foundational statement, foundational thought.
So we, as we said, we brought together two groups of 25 people. And what came out of one of these sessions, we're going to show you the moment that they discovered their purpose. It's kind of a great moment to watch the organization. And when you watch this, I want you to look at two things, not just what the people are saying, but watch the reactions when the other people see the new purpose for the first time. You'll see a lot of heads nodding and people saying at that moment, "Hey, that's actually what we do," and that's exciting. You'll see how much consensus.
We kind of looked at it as, everyone looks at, again, the expense reports as, it's just business, right? It's something that it's a necessarily evil. So we landed on humanizing essential interactions. And some of the ways that we do that, again, is through the way that we do customer success and customer interaction, mobile. If we look at a feature, again, that humanizes that element, and then bringing together, finance and employees, those kind of things.
Tom and I were talking. This is an incredibly strong idea. What do we do in the writing world? We take out the INGs most of the time. Easy enough.
Yeah.
This is a huge idea. Speaking with you, this would be, So, because what you want to implement, and taking away that distrust, removing resentments, bringing departments together, creating respect between the CFOs and the hedonists, 1%. This is a very, very potent deal.
So that was the moment, and you sort of saw the smiles and the people saying, "Yeah, that is what we do," and that was exciting. This is a question I got from Karna just now, who said, "Who was included in the room for the workshop, and did you start this session with blue sky or start from an initial purpose?" So Karna, two things. So who was included in this room? There were a group of people that had been selected that represented all aspects of the organization and included the executive leadership team, but also kind of like one level down from there. And then we over-indexed a little bit on the sales and marketing people, the people who are customer facing. and they all participated in this. It's a series of structured exercises that help you get to the point where you build the purpose. And so we talked a little bit about that, but yeah, as Grant said here, C-suite execs, sales, marketing, customer success, all those folks. And we bring them into this session and work them through a series of exercises that culminates in creating the purpose statement. Okay. So that's what that looked like. And just to flesh it out a little bit more, this, the statement that we came up with was that Emburse humanized work. And we talked a little bit about how CFOs and controllers want to make a big strategic impact, but they tend to fall back into a policing mindset. They want to catch all those crazy spending people. But Emburse gives them the confidence to go beyond simply enforcing compliance to empower employees and achieve their goals. So it was a big change, and as you can see, a big difference from how Concur was positioning themselves in the marketplace. And this is something that resonated. Now, this is built by 50 people within the organization. So you have a good start on creating a purpose for the organization. There are 50 people across the company that had participated in creating helping to build this, but it had to be launched to the rest of the organization and to the world. And so together with Grant, we worked to create a purpose video that explained this idea and talked a little bit more about what it meant to introduce it to both the employees at large across the company, as well as to the greater marketplace. And so
I'm supposed to talk at this on this slide, but ultimately I think the video should speak for itself.
Sorry about that, Bruce.
All
right.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Louise. And Mary, Kim, Amitesh, and Susan. Thanks to all you CFOs that gave us Emburse, the travel and expense management solution that removes everything we hate about travel and expense management. The lost hours and weekends completing tedious, time-consuming expense reports. Thanks for replacing that with an intuitive, simple-to-use app that lets us do it on our terms in far less time. Thanks for making our jobs more focused, more interesting, and for making the place where we spend so much time more human. Mike, Janet, Lou, all of you, thanks for empowering us to do the work we like to do, we're trained to do, we're meant to do. And thanks for helping us live the lives that make all that work worthwhile. Thanks for embracing Emburse.
I want you to notice something. When we talk about humanized work, we don't mean it to be a tagline. It was a purpose statement. And when we do the executions, there's a lot of different ways to state it. But so a lot of people in our groups try to make taglines during this thing. It's not. It's a grand, big statement.
And I must say that look, Tom and Bruce wrote the script. I'll take credit for editing it, and it was produced, and we launched it at Sales Kickoff before COVID, January 20th, 2020. And if you're a head of marketing or sales, somebody else here on the call, division head. No better time than a kickoff launch. We've got, standing applause, and, we'll talk a little bit more about how we brought it to life over time. This was all the foundational, super sound strategy work. As Tom said, first 50 people, and then we launched it 750, the whole company, and just built on it over the 3 years I was there.
We were just excited to be a part of that and watch it all happen. But it doesn't just stop with videos and launches. What we like to do is continue our work further into the organization, and that starts to roll into how this work impacts the employees and the team. And part of that is building what we call core values or operational values for the organization. And as part of our work, we then went and Bruce, do you want to talk about this?
Well, I was, but then you jumped right in. Yeah, and so we really want to make sure that both the mission, vision statements, and the core values are really aiming towards that purpose statement. These are the values that are necessary for your organization to practice in order to make the purpose come to life and to become part of your identity. It's empathy, empowerment, synergy, individuality, and transparency. If we practice these core values, then you're leading towards empowering your purpose to be tangible, and also now you're developing tactics around delivering on your purpose. So these are the things that the organization must practice in order to keep that purpose alive.
Yeah, and again, these all came from the team. It's nothing that we handed them. It was through the process we developed those. We also created this little acronym that Grant mentioned. We called See It. So we rolled them into different words just to help them remember it. That it's just and their actions and behaviors that were visible through the way that we treat each other, our partners, and our customers. And so that's kind of where we sort of did something of a handoff to Grant. I mean, we continue to work with them, but a lot of this work now has to be taken and formalized and made into something much more tangible in terms of marketing programs. And so we're going to hand it over to Grant now. He's going to talk a little bit about what the team, how the team took this, and then how he was able to evaluate and look at the success of the efficacy of the programs and measure them with a marketing performance index. So you want to talk now, Grant?
Sure. Yeah, let me just add a little color. Like many of us have relaunched brands. I've done it, probably half a dozen times myself. Obviously, Tom and Bruce have done it for 20 years. And we had this great, See It. This is our Portland, Maine. We had a dual headquarters. I was in the LA office. In Portland, Maine, you can see the brand statements on the wall. We humanize work, brand purpose statement. We get to See It. We define each of those values. You consider the rotating GIF there, and the Emburse logo. And then we happened to lease a building in Portland. If the other Portland, Maine, we had to get a permit, but we were able to put humanized work. We got on the local TV. It helped us in our recruiting, and we did social media campaigns. How do you humanize work? And you'll see this statement. It wasn't in year one, it's year two, and the CEO says, "How do we accelerate this great start?" I said, "Well, what if we verbify? We may not be Google or Venmo, but we were up against this big dog." And by the way, somebody's asked about competition. We took 400 concur customers, not because they couldn't see what we could see, because the way we treated our customers and prospects, how we interacted, the humanizing work aspect of being better listeners and delivering value and customizing, tailoring solutions to meet their needs, not one size fits all these things. And, we made T-shirts for our customer conferences. We see people come back to a conference everywhere and don't just expense it and burst it on the back, right? And just Emburse it or whatever it might be. So there's various things that you can do, whether it's through your brand guides and your dynamic web, your creative demand and brand campaigns. But I think, I asked each of the functional heads, how do you internalize it? How are you going to make work more human if somebody's got to open a support ticket, or if they got to get paid? I mean, they're our customers, right? So things like that really made it last. And, there's been sort of leadership changes, as you might expect. But the core, if you just go to Emburse now, you see the core is there. When you find the right strategic position, as Tom and Bruce helped us do, and you do the right sort of build it over time, it's certainly scalable and meaningful to your customers. It can last, and it can be a true differentiator. There's been copycats since then, but I don't think anybody's quite struck this chord. So anyway, that's sort of a little bit the Emburse story. Tom and Bruce year one, kind of me in year 2 and 3 of my team, great creative team, and now I think we can shift over to kind of sort of a broader view. Early this summer, I published something called the Marketing Performance Index, and I've been a CMO for 15 years, 5 times. Over 3 years, 3 times. So it's not just a bunch of 1 years. I've been pretty fortunate. I've been acquired sometimes. That's shortened a few stints, as you might imagine, but it's not a bad thing. Sometimes you get acquired and they ask you to take on a bigger team. And so I was really talking, I know 100 CMOs, peers, and all these peer groups I'm part of, and say, hey, we're really struggling improving the value of marketing. We're always having to defend what we do. And I'd been metrics oriented. So I came up with this idea, like, how do we quantify brand, market, and demand in a way that CEOs, boards, and investors can all agree on, and show that if you do them properly together, if you build your market presence, if you build brand strength, and if you enhance your pipeline health, they're going to make you a more efficient go-to-market system. So that's sort of the idea behind it. Now, if we go to the next chart, I'll share with you it's a bit of an eye chart, but it's got a construct to it that I think is fairly simple. And I'll give a high level overview. As you know, Tom and Bruce said, I can go more in depth. I do a free diagnostic, takes 30 minutes to any head of marketing in any industry around the world. I've done a bunch of them. But if you kind of look at it, the measurements are structured across market presence, brand strength, and pipeline health. And each of those, let's just take market presence, for example. And the scale, I actually looked at really good industry stats. I've got a continuous tracking metrics partner who's got a bunch of SaaS and B2B metrics. It works for B2C as well, but in particular for B2B. And so we look at how things change over time. And we looked at Forrester decisions, formerly Sirius decisions. We looked at Gartner. Insight's got 5,000 portfolios, so their metrics I think are pretty sound. And I've created 20 billion in pipeline, so we kind of mashed it all together. And I tested with about a dozen CMOs, and now I've done about a dozen of these diagnostics. And essentially, you look at market presence, you look at reach and share. Why reach and share? Well, when your customers, we all know that in tech, maybe 10, if you're lucky, 20% of the customers are ever in the market today. So next year, next month, next quarter, they're in the market and they're searching. So that's why earned media is important. They read about you, social media, they see you online, right? Site visitors, your site, sings, right? It's, you don't have a high abandonment rate. And then share, it's like, how do? You get mentioned in an article about, hey, I've been in cybersecurity. If you're CrowdStrike, now you're CrowdStrike's competitors, we do better. This won't happen with us, right? So you kind of figure out how to do that. And then, your unbranded search is really your SEO, and your branded, people would type Chrome River. That was one of our former brands. They type certify. How do we get them to type Emburse, right? So that's market presence. Brand strength is engagement and loyalty. Engagement's both for prospects and customers. I mean, it's are they, referring your social media? They are opening your emails? Are they attending your webinars? And how does that compare year over year to your competitors? Same thing with loyalty. I used in the Market Performance Index very standard measures of NPS and CSAT. I didn't make those up. These have been around for decades, but it's commonly known if you're below 30, you're below average. If you're 30 to 70, you're kind of good. And if you're above 70, you're world class. And then the same thing with pipeline health. You look at the key things of building a pipeline. You've got to have top of funnel leads. You've got to have conversion. You've got to have a multiple. Unless your sales team can win every deal, you need 2, 3, 4, 5x. And on the progression side, you need to progress from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified opportunity, ultimately to close one business. And those metrics follow certain conversion formulas that are tested against industry benchmarks. And when you take this, you just input these 24 numbers. And I found some folks say, hey, we're not tracking NPS, or we don't really have an online community or a customer advisory board. Oh, fine. Substitute something you want. I can't say if your CEO needs 5 or 50 metrics. I just know that these 24 metrics across these 3 areas can indicate your relative performance, show you where you're weak, show you where you're overperforming so you can better allocate resources. So let's look at a sample one here. I can't disclose the company. When I do this, I do it anonymously. But what's great about it, now that I've been doing it for a few months, is it immediately shows by the colors, and then you have to get the context where you're doing well. Now, this particular company, they're about $50 million company. I mostly work with companies 25 to 250 million. That's kind of where my career's been, but I've worked with billion and pure startups. But if you see under engagement, they got 100. Now, each of the answers will give you a score up to 100, and then you average all the scores overall. You can see they're almost a 70, which is a good score. And they're crushing engagement, right? So, the people are on their website, they go to their events, but they're getting killed in progression. They're not lacking pipeline. They're not lacking opportunities. But as I talked to them, as we uncovered what was happening, is they would have opportunities get stalled. They'd be taken along for the ride, as I call it, but they were not the vendor of choice, right? They were because they wanted enough opportunities to kind of make the end number bookings. They were pursuing things they should have abandoned. They didn't get to power. You get to power, if anybody knows solution selling, you get to the power, they're going to say, hey, next time. Or they're going to say, you know what, I think you guys are better, different, and you're in the mix. And so they're going to change. Talk to them back in July. They're starting to change those tactics. We're going to look at it every quarter. And lo and behold, I think they're almost a 60 now. And you're not going to get to 90 overnight. And that's the other thing to keep in mind. With the Market Performance Index, you set a baseline. And then you determine, hey, where do I have people executive priorities, financial resources. Where do I put dollars to improve my overall marketing effectiveness and increase marketing's contribution to growth and the bottom line? So if you look at this next one here, this is what I tracked at Emburse. This was sort of the precursor of the Marketing Performance Index. I mean, the CEO, great guy, Tom and Bruce know him as well. And he said, hey, Grant, you're good, but I want you to prove it. We're launching this brand. We're spending a lot of money. Show me the value of all the things you're doing. What's working, what's not working. So I combined all these things. A little bit hard to read, but just give you a sense. This was Q1 of 2020. COVID hits. You can see we went down a little bit, 3%, if you can read that lower half chart. Then I started doing some better inbound. We got to bounce up, launched a new website. We launched an intent platform. And then we had some business disruption, some product issues, and it went down. So it wasn't like a linear thing, just like most businesses don't just go up. But over a course of 2 years, it increased almost 50% from the baseline, a number of 62 to 94. And, across the board, we had improvements. I'll show you this next chart. In brand, because we were a new brand, the CEO wanted me to double click. So I didn't just do the 24, I went even deeper. I can't show you the composite, but I can show the overall line. We looked at share of voice, we looked at sentiment, because if we weren't handling support tickets, mean time to resolution fast, or we weren't responsive, excuse me, or, we didn't close the ticket or satisfy the customer need, that would impact us. And then ultimately, we had loyalty, and we had people, we got to at one point 1,000 people part of our community. And guess what? They would connect with each other, and they would help each other become more fluent on our solution. Great trick. If you haven't done that before, works really well. So that's the index. That's the brand performance within the index for Emburse. And I'm going to summarize here and turn it back over to the guys. As it takes about an hour, you can substitute metrics. I've got my contact in there. I'm happy to do for anybody already. Head of marketing, you set the baseline. You can certainly add weighting. If the CEO says pipeline, okay, give pipeline 3x weighting. That's okay, but it shouldn't be 100%. Get agreement on the metrics. We all can control our destiny better as leaders if we agree on what the expectations are and what we can achieve. Now, we may want to always get better, of course, but if somebody says, well, I was expecting X and you delivered Y, you're out of alignment. And then invest where you think you're going to get the best lift. And my experience is where I come in as a CMO mentor, I can say, hey, that's a dead end, or that thing is something you should double down on, right? Performance marketing is going to get you X. And then ultimately, in the age of Gen AI, you've just got to experiment. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, stop doing it. Try to always improve, and then ultimately reach your goal. And that's a quick overview of the Marketing Performance Index and a couple of places where I've seen it work.
Thank you so much, Grant. So at this point, one other thing I just want to touch on to just add a little bit of background on this is that there's pretty remarkable big picture impact at Emburse. Especially as things launched that I don't think Grant has even touched on here. That right after this, Emburse was the fastest growing company in its category, growing twice as fast as nearly any other competitor and in their space. And then Grant talked about COVID hitting right after this launched. Well, in that year, the overall industry revenue dropped by 9%, but Emburse grew market share by 27% during that time.
Yeah, exactly, Tom. And I'll say this: if you follow public companies, just look at Expedia. If you're in the travel industry, their revenue was down by 90%. You did the average, and we were up double digits in selling travel and expense and invoice automation. So we were obviously serving customers as effectively as we could, and the brand was growing and meaningful and humanizing work for customers.
Yeah, and without being too negative, I would say that morale was pretty challenged when we first got there. It was not necessarily great. And within I think it was a 1.5 year period, they got to the point where their employee net promoter score was 4.5 times that of an average company. It had improved so dramatically because people really rallied around this idea. I mean, they loved the idea of humanizing work as something that everybody, bought into and believed, and it became the mantra of the whole organization.
And also just the act of the organization, bringing the organization together to decide on their future. is really important. I mean, it sounds like it's a common sense, but it doesn't always happen. We've dealt with that a couple of times, especially when the private equity enters the picture, and people are terrified, and there needs to be a sort of community brought together where people feel like they have a decision on the fate of their communications and their purpose, etc. It's vital for your organization.
So at this point, we're happy to answer if people have questions. You can either speak up directly or put them in the chat, as other people have throughout the event. But we're happy to field any questions or get any further clarifications on anything that we've presented. I know there's a lot of material to cover in a fairly short amount of time, so please pipe up, ask us anything that you would like to know.
I'd be interested in hearing from Grant. I know that you mentioned you do all that work, come up with the purpose statement, and then you have to go through the tactile execution of translating that into marketing programs, marketing messages. Could you provide maybe some color commentary on that? Because I think it's a critical element to make this all work.
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that part of my key deliverable, I always aligned as a CMO to the top 5 company objectives, top 4 or 5. How can marketing contribute to those? How do we measure our contribution? And it's not as if we launched a We Humanize Work campaign. As Bruce said, it's a purpose statement. We're not. It's not a tagline. But we found natural, organic ways to weave that into our overall go-to-market communication. So I talked about the internal, how do you make it easy for customers to do business with us, i.e. how do you humanize work? We had a spotlight series of our customers, and if you got into COVID, they'd say, oh, thank you, Emburse. Like I can't go into the office, but I can still, pay reimburse my employees, there's still some people that over time were traveling, or pay my vendors who we had an invoice automation solution. So, we found ways to do that. And there were certain campaigns we do digitally where we had a little fun. And, we were always trying to combine brand with demand. So if we were to do it, we wouldn't just do like an ad that would run on, assorted media. It would drive somebody to a landing page. And we launched this product in year 2 called Emburse Spend. And, this is a more human way to give your employees, empower your employees, track and manage your spend effortlessly. And so I got this landing page, and here's how we humanize work. Click here. I was able to get 1 out of 5 signups. Now, I've done e-commerce for many, many years, as have my teams. And I've never had a 1 out of 5. So I think part of it was, we had a good offering, but we also were very approachable as a brand. It was the messaging, the color palette, the value prop. And how easy the form was to fill out, how fast we get back to you and issue the credit card, or in this case, the Emburse card, what sort of value that you could put in, how you'd interact with your bank. So there was a lot of things we do. We were always mindful that we were going to find ways to do this. And probably one of the most successful campaigns that we did was through social media. And we said, here's how we humanize work. If you remember the fall, I don't know how many of us you do, raise your hand. 2020, business were barely open. And so we did this campaign around the world and said, here's how easy it is to support local business. Go in, to all 750 employees, anywhere you live in the world, could have been, Amsterdam or London or Spain or, New York or California, where I was, and do business locally. And say, here's how easy, snap a photo, we auto reimburse you. And then we turn that into all these local places that we're helping keep support by, frequenting them, telling our friends about them, post on social media. It became the Emburse guide to the hidden gems around the world. So it's like really cool restaurants in Italy, or, somewhere in Atlanta, right? Buckstown, whatever. And so it had legs, right? But it was all around humanizing work. So that was the thematic thread that, made it real, connected. I will tell you one last anecdote if I have time. And somebody brought up Concur. We won a 7-figure deal against Concur because it's not that Tom and Bruce made up, here's what Concur stands for, here's what Emburse stands for. They talked to customers. They looked at G2 crowd sites. We had a deal we went to, and I can't remember the financial institution, their top 10. They said, you guys were always on the Zoom. You see my face? And Concur was so confident they never put their face on Zoom. That was their personality, right? We're the best. Just go with us. You don't have to see us. And the rep to this day swears that's how she got the deal.
And it's just, and so back to what you were saying, Grant. I mean, when purpose becomes the ethos of the organization, not just a tagline or a slogan that sits around, but it becomes something that people live and breathe, then it becomes something that has huge power and has ultimate impact on, the bottom line at the end of the day.
Let me give you another example. We talked about the fundamental human values, but for example, the purpose statement for Red Bull is "We energize the world." Now, there's no beverage in there at all, but when you say "we energize the world," that allows Red Bull to scale up to all kinds of activities and products and events that create this kind of frenzy. And that's what they're about. That's their purpose. That's why they live. So that's what the purpose statement, that's how foundational it is.
Any other questions? I know that some people have to jump and get back, but we're happy to answer any other things. In the chat, at the top, I provided my email. And Grant, I don't know if you were dropped yours in there too, but anybody who wants, feel free to reach out to us. Happy to help talk a little bit more about this topic. As you can tell, we're passionate about it. I mean, this is what makes Bruce and I tick every single day. Yeah, so Grant dropped his into the chat. Any other questions? Anything else we can answer? All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining. And we're looking forward to hopefully hearing from some of you in the future. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.